When we look around, it feels like humans own this world. Skyscrapers, weapons, the internet, religion, capitalism, all of it came straight out of our minds. But have you ever wondered how we actually became human? Our ancestors used to be terrified of lions. They hid quietly in the woods, scavenging for food. And then, something happened. Something that turned us from just another animal into the rulers of the planet. We created language. We imagined things that didn't exist. We spread stories, even lies, as if they were truth. And we built a world made of paper, myths, and imagination. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, isn't just another book. It's the story of humanity's dark journey, from primitive hunters all the way to global superpowers. A story packed with cunning, deception, war, psychology, and the raw truth of power. And this book was written by Yuval Noah Harari. Is the man behind this book, a writer who uses history, science, and psychology like a razor-sharp blade, cutting straight into the truth. Now listen closely. If you think the world revolves around you, if you believe humans are the smartest species alive, this book will shatter that belief into pieces. Here you'll find the raw truth behind religion, the hidden conspiracies of society, the illusion of money, and the darkness inside the human mind. The part you've probably never even felt before. We're breaking this summary into 7 deep chapters. Each one will take you into some of the darkest and most revolutionary turning points in human history. And with every line, something inside you will break, and something new will be built. But hold on, before we dive into this journey, there's one thing you need to do. Hit that subscribe button. That way your mind can finally collide with the truth you've only ever seen, wrapped in lies. Now, get ready, because we're starting with Chapter 1, The Cognitive Revolution, when imagination took control. Picture a world where predators lurk in every corner of the forest. Humans are the weakest creatures out there, and daylight doesn't even guarantee safety. As for the night, forget about it. Even the sound of a twig snapping is enough to make your heart stop. This was the time when humans were nothing more than animals. No history, no religion, no trade, just a daily fight to survive. But then, something happened. Something slow, invisible, yet more dangerous than any explosion. What we now call the cognitive revolution. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a weapon. It was a way of thinking, a power of imagination that separated humans from every other species. Around 70,000 years ago, some Homo sapiens began doing something no other creature could. They started telling stories. They invented gods that weren't real, created enemies that never existed, and told lies so powerful, those lies became the very foundation of civilization. And you think humans ruled the world because of strength? No. We ruled the world because of shared belief. When 10 lions hunted together, it wasn't because someone read them a holy book telling them to unite, but 10 humans. Even without knowing each other, without ever meeting face to face, they were willing to die for the same flag, the same nation, the same currency. That is the real power of the cognitive revolution. So, what were humans like in the beginning? Back then, people lived in small groups. Everyone hunted, gathered fruit, and spent the whole day searching for food. There was no farming, no houses, no clothes, and no deep language. But slowly, as the human mind learned to imagine, something changed. Around the fire, they began telling each other stories. Beyond that mountain lives a spirit. If you pick this flower, the gods will be angry. Our tribe is sacred. Everyone else is wrong. And that's where the game of imagination began. That's when humans became the creators of an imaginary world, a web of beliefs, and the rule of lies. Animals can't lie. Lions, leopards, elephants, they believe only what they see. But humans? A human is the one who can take something that doesn't exist and make it feel more real than the truth. Heaven, hell, justice, nations, money, human rights. None of these actually exist in reality. They're all products of imagination, stories we've collectively agreed to believe. That's why one person is willing to sacrifice their life for a piece of cloth we call a flag. That's why millions of people go to war in the name of a god no one has ever seen. Shared myths equal massive societies. The cognitive revolution gave humans a weapon far more deadly than any sword: collective fiction, shared imagination. Suddenly, a human didn't just connect with 20, 50, or even 100 people. They could unite with thousands, even millions of total strangers. Why? Because everyone believed in the same myth, the same story, the same gods, the same rules. If you and I both believe in the same religion, we can trust each other, even if we've never met. That's the secret behind why humans could build civilizations, raise empires, trade across continents, and fight wars. And the most dangerous tool of all? Language. But imagination alone wasn't enough. We needed a way to spread it, to share it, and that way was language. At first, early languages were only good for warnings. The tiger's coming. Fire over here. But human language went deeper. It gained layers of thought, depth, and the art of storytelling. Now we could say things like, if you go into the forest, there's a spirit that will protect you. Language didn't just pass on information anymore. It shared emotions, trust, and even fear. Gossip, the social glue. Here's a funny but terrifying truth. The evolution of human language is tied to gossip. Back when people lived in small groups, the most important thing wasn't just knowing where food was. It was knowing who could be trusted and who couldn't. John's a cheater. Sarah stole something. Mike's the best hunter around. John's is the best hunter around. Gossip connected humans socially, and that social bond became the foundation of civilization, the very power of collective imagination. Even today, the things you believe in, government, laws, money, they're all just stories. Take a piece of paper we call a $100 bill. Its only value is that we've all agreed it has value. Hand that same bill to an animal, and it'll chew it up. Why? Because animals don't buy into the imagination. But humans live inside stories. Humans live and die for stories, and in the name of stories, they kill too. Danger mixed with cunning, that's what the cognitive revolution unleashed. It gave humans a terrifying power, the ability to deceive themselves with their own imagination. Now, humans weren't just dominating animals, they could enslave other humans. They could sacrifice lives in the name of religion. They could burn entire civilizations to the ground for the sake of power. Imagination didn't make us gods, but it made us believe we were gods. From hunters to rulers, think about it. There was a time when we ran terrified from lions in the wild, and today, we keep lions locked in cages and eat popcorn while watching them. That isn't a miracle. That's the victory of human cunning. And it all started with the cognitive revolution. The moment humans learned that real power doesn't come from muscle, it comes from the mind. So what's the truth? And what's just a story? Next time you look at a dollar bill, or read a holy book, or hear a national anthem, stop and ask yourself, is this real? Or is it just a story we've all agreed to treat as real? Because the cognitive revolution didn't just give humans the power to think, it gave us the power to live inside lies as if they were truth. And that's the darkness our entire civilization is still breathing in today. Chapter 2. The Agricultural Revolution. Blessing or Betrayal. The moment humans planted the first seed, that was the moment we buried our freedom. For centuries, we've been told farming was humanity's greatest achievement. People learned how to grow food, build villages, form societies, and from there, civilization was born. But here's the truth. The agricultural revolution wasn't a blessing. It wasn't even a revolution. It was history's greatest conspiracy. Not a gift, a slow poison. A poison so sweet, no one even realized they were being enslaved. So let's rewind. Back to a world 12,000 years ago. A world of forests, freedom, and the life of hunters and gatherers. Humans wandering through the wild. Back then, humans ate whatever they found. If food wasn't there, they simply moved on to the next forest. No houses, no borders, no dependence on crops. Humans were hunters, fast, free, and masters of their environment. Hungry, pick some fruit, dig up roots, or hunt an animal. Every day was new. Every path was open. But the moment we started planting crops, our world began to shrink. Now we had to wait, plant the seeds, water them, hope the sun shined, pray the weather stayed right. Only then came food. And if one untimely storm ruined it all, entire families starved. Once, humans searched for food, but farming trapped us in the slavery of growing it. We think we domesticated wheat, but look closer. Wheat domesticated us. 10,000 years ago, wheat was just a wild grass, found only in certain places. But then humans began to grow it. And slowly we bent our lives to fit its needs. We woke up with the sun for it. We prayed for rain for it. We fought off insects for it. We plowed land, built irrigation, and kept constant watch, all for wheat. There came a time when an entire human life was spent serving a single plant. That's why historians say humans didn't adopt wheat. Wheat enslaved humans. Yes, farming gave us more food, but it gave us less nutrition. People often say agriculture created abundance. But think about it. A hunter-gatherer ate more than 50 different types of plants, fruits, roots, and animals in a single day. Their diet was balanced, diverse, and full of the triumph of planned, crowned. Farming changed all of that. Suddenly, food was limited to just 3 or 4 crops. Wheat, rice, barley, millet. Over and over again, diversity disappeared. Vitamins and minerals dropped. Bones weakened. Bodies became smaller and thinner. Sure, there was food on the table, but healthy bodies vanished. The fear of hunger, the birth of property. Hunter-gatherers ate what they found, then moved on. They didn't know how to store food, and they didn't need to. But farmers? They stockpiled everything. Wheat, rice, lentils, oil. Storage became survival. And where there's property, there's fear. What if a drought hits tomorrow? What if the neighbors steal it? What if rats eat it all? Humans felt more secure than ever, and yet more insecure than ever. To protect their property, they built fences, then walls, then weapons, then guards. And that's where the first wars began, over land, over grain, and over power. The chains of labor. A hunter-gatherer worked just a few hours a day. Back then, hunters had plenty of free time to play, to talk, to think. But farmers? Their day started before sunrise and ended long after the moon was up, plowing the land, watering the crops, pulling weeds, fighting off insects, harvesting, storing, Work was no longer a choice. Work began to own humans. Even children were thrown in. Farming didn't just break the human body. Slowly, it broke the human spirit. The birth of social inequality. In hunter-gatherer life, everyone was equal. Whoever hunted, shared. No high, no low. No kings, no ranks. But farming introduced land ownership. And where land was divided, people became divided too. Some had more fields, more grain, more storage. Others became workers for them. That's where rich and poor were born. Masters and servants, rulers and subjects. With farming came exploitation. A small class feasted at banquets, while the majority labored under the scorching sun, breaking their backs in the dirt. The fall of health. The explosion of population. And here's the big question. If farming was such a curse, why did humans ever choose it? And the answer is population. Farming may have been weaker in nutrition, but it could feed more mouths. One field could support 10 people. Sure, the food was rough, less nutritious, but it was food. And once stomachs were full, people started having more children. Populations grew. And soon, farming wasn't a choice anymore. It became a necessity. There was no going back. Humans had left the forest behind and now carried the burden of wheat on their backs. Or yeah, the golden cage. At first glance, it looked like humans had won. Fields, houses, food security. But think about it. Imagine a magnificent palace. The catch? To live in it, you have to work 16 hours a day. No weekends, no breaks. And if the weather betrays you, you starve. Is that freedom? Or is that slavery? Farming gave humans comfort, yes, but it also chained them. Once kings of the forest, we became slaves to the field. A slow, sweet poison. That's why historians call the agricultural revolution the greatest deception in human history. Farming didn't make us stronger. It didn't make us healthier. It didn't make us free. It made us smaller, weaker, sicker, slaves. And the most dangerous part, we didn't even realize it. This so-called revolution was a trap. A trap humans walked into willingly, thinking, now I'm the master. But in reality, we were becoming nothing more than laborers. And here's the question that still haunts us today. When we drive cars through our cities, when tractors plow endless fields, when we trade with just a tap on our phones, have we truly advanced? Or have we just made the same trap shinier? Are we still slaves to wheat? Or have we simply traded it for technology? The agricultural revolution began with the promise of prosperity, but what it actually gave us was a system of suffering. Chapter 3. The Power of Myths. Lies that built civilization. Some lies are so beautiful that entire civilizations rise upon them. Think about it. The things we call truth today, religion, nations, money, justice, rights, none of them actually exist in nature. They are myths, stories we created, then collectively agreed to believe. And now, generation after generation, we defend them as if they were real. But ask yourself, when a man gives his life in the name of an invisible god, or when millions march to war over a flag, where does the real power lie? Not in the weapon, but in the story. This chapter shows us how imagination, the myths we invented, became the backbone of human civilization, and how, through shared belief, we built a world that doesn't truly exist. So what are myths, really? So, what exactly are myths? Myths are ideas, stories, that aren't built on any physical truth, yet millions of people believe in them as if they were real. God created the world. All humans are born with equal rights. America is a nation. A dollar has value. None of these statements can be scientifically proven, and yet they run our lives. Because myths aren't just stories. They are the invisible threads that hold human society together. Shared myths equals massive networks. Alone, a human being is weak. But when millions of people believe in the same story, that's when civilizations are built. That's how laws exist. That's how societies function. That's how trade, war, religion, and justice all come alive. Think about it. If we all stopped believing that money has value, then money would mean nothing. If we stopped believing a government has the right to rule, no leader could stay in power. A myth is whatever people agree to believe until it becomes reality. Politics? It's not just a fight for power. It's the art of creating and spreading stories. Every nation crafts its own sacred tale. We are the greatest. We are different. Our history is the oldest. Our faith is the truest. That is the myth of nationalism. Now imagine, if a foreigner looks you in the eye and says, "Your flag is just a piece of cloth," what happens then? Of course you get angry. You might even turn violent. Why? Because that flag isn't just a piece of cloth anymore. It's become an emotional myth, a part of your very identity. Religion. This has always been the most powerful myth of all. Every religion in history has been built on collective belief. You'll be rewarded with 72 virgins in paradise. Achieve salvation, and you will escape the cycle of rebirth. God created the world in 7 days. None of these claims can be proven by science. No one has ever seen them firsthand. And yet, billions of people put their faith in them. Religion gave humans a shared identity. Rituals, prayers, fasting, codes of purity, moral laws. But at the same time, it divided us. We are right. They are wrong. And from that mindset came wars, massacres, hatred, and violence in the name of faith. Then comes money, the most successful myth of all. Think about it. You pick up a dollar bill. It has a face on it, a serial number, a little piece of paper. That's all. But when you walk into a store with it, you can buy food, clothes, even the latest iPhone. Why? Because everyone else also believes in the myth that this piece of paper has value. But imagine, what if tomorrow everyone decided this bill was fake? And the moment people stop believing in it, money becomes worthless. Its value drops straight to zero. Money is humanity's most brilliant shared imagination, a story so clever that the entire world agreed to play along. Then comes law and justice, another set of moral myths. Murder is wrong. Stealing is a sin. Rapists should be punished. These aren't scientific truths. They're moral agreements we created to keep society peaceful. No animal thinks this way. When a lion kills a deer, it doesn't feel guilty. But a human does. Why? Because we invented the myth of justice, and this myth keeps order in our world. The newest, and perhaps the most beloved myth of all, human rights. The idea that every human being is equal. It sounds beautiful, inspiring even. But in nature, equality doesn't exist. An elephant and a squirrel are not equal. Neither are a king and a beggar. Yet, as a society, we decided every human deserves the same rights, no matter where they're born. That too is a myth, a moral principle we wrote into laws. But in reality, society applies it however it wants. Power itself rests on myths. The one who can create a story and make people believe it's the truth becomes the real owner of power. Kings, priests, dictators, politicians, they've all mastered the same art, the art of creating belief. Sometimes in the name of God, sometimes in the name of the nation, sometimes in the name of justice, sometimes in the name of progress. and people chase that belief blindly, even to the point of giving their lives for it. Media and myths. We live in a digital age, but the stories haven't changed. Now it's TV, the internet, and social media spinning the myths. This product will change your life. This leader will save the nation. Join this religion, and all your problems will vanish. These are just modern avatars of the same old myths. The person who understands how these stories work uses them. The one who doesn't becomes their slave. The lies we need. Here's the harsh truth. Without myths, humans could never work together. Imagine you're a doctor. Your patient is from a rival religion. Without the shared myth of human rights, would you save him? Or think about soldiers. If they didn't believe the nation comes first, would they be willing to fight and die? If soldiers didn't believe the nation comes first, no border would ever stay secure. That's the point. Sometimes lies become necessary when shared belief is the only thing that keeps humans united. So, does that mean everything is a lie? No. Not everything is a lie, but not everything is truth either. The myths that bring people together, we might call those collective wisdom. The myths that divide us, they turn into collective madness. The real question isn't whether a myth is true or false. The question is, why was it created? Who's the real author of the story you believe in? Once in a while, you have to ask yourself, your thoughts, your religion, your nationalism, your moral values, are they really yours? Or were they written by someone long ago, and you're just living inside their story? Maybe your ideas are echoes from an ancient book. Maybe your entire identity is someone else's imagination. Chapter 4. The Wheat Conspiracy. What if it wasn't humans who domesticated wheat, but wheat that domesticated us? Picture a turning point in history. A moment when humanity thought it was making its greatest leap forward, but was actually making its biggest mistake. The event we proudly call the agricultural revolution was in reality a slow-acting poison. A poison that buried the human soul deep into the soil. In this chapter, we're going to open up that haunting moment in history. The moment humans stopped being hunters and became farmers. Maybe it wasn't humanity that made the choice at all. Maybe it was a tiny little plant, wheat, that forced us into it. Around 10,000 years ago, humans roamed open fields. They hunted, they gathered roots and fruits. Life was simple. Sure, it was tough, but they were free. Then came a turning point. Some human communities noticed something strange. Certain plants, like wheat, barley, and rice, kept growing in the same spots, again, and rice. So they started planting them, just to make gathering easier. But convenience slowly turned into addiction. And that's where humanity's greatest slavery began. Think about it. Humans once owned the land. Now they became servants of the land. From sunrise to sunset, plowing, sowing, irrigating, fighting off pests, harvesting. All for something they once got freely in the wild. And who started all this? Wheat. Yes, wheat. A small, ordinary-looking plant was the real mastermind. At first, it was just a wild grass, but it managed to convince humans, if you plant me, I'll feed you. That promise, that temptation, ran so deep that humans ended up dedicating their entire lives to serving that plant. Look closely, and you'll see it was a massive psychological trap. Farming sold humans the dream of a safe and secure life. It promised, no more wandering, now you'll have stability. But that very stability broke humanity's spine. Now they would change to one place. Diseases grew, nutrition declined, inequality was born. Hunters had strong, tall, flexible bodies. Farmers, their bodies grew weaker, bent, and diseased. Humans thought they were raising wheat, but in reality, wheat was raising humans. They tended to it. They cleared land for it. They protected it from pests. They gave it water. Is that the behavior of a master with a pet? No, it was the opposite. Humans had become slaves to a plant. Think about it. Once, wheat was just a wild grass in a few regions. Now, it had spread across the entire planet. Wheat used humans to build its empire. It turned humanity into its carrier, a carrier that worked day and night, yet often went hungry itself. And along with farming came something else, an explosion in population. More food meant more children, but every extra child demanded even more wheat. That meant more fields, more labor, more chains, an endless cycle where humans became nothing more than a cog in the wheel. With the agricultural revolution came another dangerous invention, the idea of property. Now, whoever owned more land and more crops held the most power. That was the seed of inequality. In hunter-gatherer societies, there were no kings and no beggars. But now, some people ruled over others. Wheat haven't just enslaved humanity. It poisoned us with greed, control, and the thirst for power. And the worst part? It all happened so slowly, so silently, so cunningly, that humans didn't even realize what they were losing. After farming, people found new ways to measure their lives. Now it was all about weather, seeds, harvests, and storage. Their mornings no longer rose with the first rays of the sun. They began with worries about the fields. Their nights no longer drifted under moonlit walks. They were spent guarding piles of grain. Their bodies no longer moved to the rhythm of wild forests. They bent and broke under the harsh demands of the soil. And their souls, no longer free. They were bound to a plant they never truly chose, but that plant had chosen them. So, ask yourself, was this really progress? Was this truly development? Or maybe it was nothing but an innocent-looking, deadly illusion. There was another bitter side to this change: time. Once, humans had time to rest, time to sing, to tell stories, to think. But now, time only moved by the rhythm of the fields. The time to sow, the time to harvest, the endless wait for rain. Instead of listening to the heartbeat of nature, humans were trapped in the cycle of crops. Farming tied people to the land, but not in the way of belonging. It was a chain, binding them in place. Before, man was a part of the earth. Now, the earth had become his burden. Land had to be saved. Land had to be used. Land had to be expanded. What was once sacred had now become capital. And from here began the long, exhausting history. A history where humans mistook their own cages for paradise. But wheat's game didn't end there. It also trapped humanity inside a rigid social order. To protect the fields, groups were formed. Groups needed leaders. Leaders gave orders. And those orders crushed freedom. Where once every human was equal, now there were masters and laborers. Creativity, once alive in cave paintings, music, and dance, was now reduced to counting seeds, weighing harvests, and filling storehouses. Wheat dangled a dream before mankind. How read boys' words? Wheat dangled a dream before mankind. A dream of a future without hunger. A dream of food in every season. But the price of that dream? Freedom, time, health, and the very soul of man. Humanity paid that price quietly, generation after generation, and still pays it today. Maybe it was wheat all along. It was wheat that first taught mankind that greed, the craving for security, and the fear of the future could all become his greatest weaknesses. And anyone who learned to exploit those weaknesses could control humans on the deepest level. This was the turning point, the moment when history itself shifted. Because here, man didn't just adopt a new way of life, he sold himself. Chapter 5. The Web of Imagination. How myths and stories began to bind humans together. When a child tells a lie, we scold them. But what happens when an entire civilization stands upon a lie? Does it still count as a lie? Imagination. That's the power that separates humans from every other animal. But in this chapter, we'll face the chilling truth of how humans wove around themselves a web of lies, stories, and the voices of the dead. A web so strong, it didn't just entangle them. It shackled generations yet to come in invisible chains. When we believe a king is the son of God, or that a flag is worth more than a human life, or that a company is a legal person, these are not just words written on paper. They are living myths, burning bright inside the human mind. On these very myths, people have fought, died, and killed others. So the question is, are we still slaves to these myths today? Let's dive deeper. Imagination, the most dangerous weapon ever forged by humankind. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens lived in small bands, maybe no more than 100 people. But as their minds evolved, they created a weapon far deadlier than any spear or flame. A story, a myth, an imagination, something powerful enough to unite not just a tribe, but hundreds, thousands, even millions of strangers. No blood relation, no personal connection, just a shared illusion, a fictional truth. The will of the gods, the borders of nations, the doctrines of religion, the rules of law, the value of money, the brand of a corporation. None of these things exist in reality, yet the entire world spins around them. A lie, but a lie that binds us together. The greatest leap in human society wasn't fire, or farming, or tools. It was trust. But trust built on what? On an imagination. Think about it. If a total stranger walked up to you and said, "I follow your religion," or "I belong to your nation," suddenly, a spark of trust is born. You might invite him into your home, share your food, even do business with him. Why? Not because you know him, but because he believes in the same invisible story you do. From this lens, religion, nations, corporations, they're all massive fictional stories that millions of people choose to live inside. Religion, perhaps the most refined of them all. It may be the oldest, and definitely the most influential myth ever created by humankind. If you told a lion to worship a god, it would tear you apart. But a human will die for it. A human will kill for it. All because they believe their God commands it. The Vedas, the Bible, the Quran. They're not just books. They're the greatest myth-generating machines in history. And these myths run so deep that people mistake them for reality itself. From birth to death, entire lives are woven around these stories. And if someone dares to question them, they're branded a sinner. Now, let's talk about the most successful myth of all, the most powerful fiction shaping our world today: money. How did a mere piece of paper become the single most dominant force in human history? Why is someone willing to give you wheat, milk, or even a smartphone just because you hand them a few pieces of paper? It's simple, because they believe in the same lie you do. This is the power of collective imagination. A story carefully crafted by governments, banks, markets, and society itself. And today, the entire human civilization stands on this illusion. If tomorrow people stopped believing that money has value, millions would go bankrupt overnight. Now, let's look at another powerful myth. Corporations. You know Apple, you know Google, you know Amazon. But pause for a second. Where exactly are these companies? Are they just buildings? No. Are they their CEOs or founders? No. Are they simply the employees working there? Not really. The truth is, corporations are legal fictions. In the eyes of the law, they exist like living persons, but in reality, they are nothing more than a name, an idea that lives only on paper and in people's minds. Yet, this idea is so powerful that it employs millions of people and controls trillions of dollars.
A single company can run billion-dollar businesses and sometimes even become more powerful than the government itself. Myths versus. Here's what makes humans unique. We often live, fight, and die, not for what's real, but for what's imagined. Take a farmer. His reality is soil, water, and sunlight. But why does he work day after day? Because he believes in myths like the ideal family, social respect, and financial security. Or, look at a soldier. Why would anyone sacrifice their life? Because dying for a flag, a nation, or an idea feels like the highest honor. None of these things are tangible. You can't touch them. You can't measure them. Yet they drive people to live, to kill, and even to die. Culture, the factory of myths. Every civilization, every culture, feeds its people stories from childhood. Your religion is the only truth. Your country is the greatest nation. Your king is the image of God. Money can buy anything. Hard work can change everything. They sound convincing, but at the core, they're all myths created by society, with no scientific basis whatsoever. Still, human civilization runs on these very beliefs. The dangerous game of imagination. Imagination has the power to unite humans, but the same imagination, if shattered, can tear them apart. History is full of examples. Every time a religion, a nation, or an ideology was challenged, wars erupted, empires collapsed, civilizations were destroyed. Because the moment you try to prove someone's lie is a lie, and the moment you question those beliefs, people don't just disagree with you, they start seeing you as the enemy. That's why myths are so powerful. They don't just live in our thoughts, they become a part of our very identity. Are we still slaves? It's scary to realize that the society we live in today is also built on one massive imagination. Jobs, marriages, religion, laws, justice, they're all just stories. Now, that doesn't mean every story is a lie. These stories are what make us human. They give meaning, connection, and order to our lives. But here's the catch. When these stories start destroying humanity, when these myths begin crushing truth, that's the moment we need to stop and ask questions. Are we truly free? Or are we just characters trapped in someone else's script? The conclusion. This chapter of Sapiens takes us into the darkest corners of human consciousness, a place where the line between truth and lies completely disappears, a place where imagination becomes so powerful that reality itself becomes hard to recognize. We search for meaning in our lives, in our relationships, even in our very existence, all inside stories that someone else wrote for us. So next time someone tells you, "This is the truth," pause for a moment and ask yourself, is it really the truth? Or just a shared imagination?
Chapter 6. Empires. History's most successful deception. Imagine a force so powerful it stretches across thousands of miles. A single command from one king can shape the lives of strangers he's never even met. He speaks, and an entire civilization trembles. That's the empire, spreading like a shadow, selling the illusion of a false paradise. But empires aren't built on battles alone. They're forged through myths, stories, and a web of fear that chains the human mind. They don't just conquer land, they invade our thoughts, our traditions, even our very souls. From the moment hunter-gatherers settled into villages, power began to centralize. But the real turning point came when humans discovered something far more effective than clubs and swords: the power of stories. Every time an empire rose, it carried with it a new ideology. It claimed its culture was superior, its god was the greatest, its language was civilized, while everyone else was barbaric. And slowly, neighbors, strangers, even its own people, were forced to wear the empire's colors. Rome was one of the greatest examples. They didn't just conquer with armies, they weaponized law itself. They wore the mask of civilization, but underneath it, slavery was rebranded as sophistication. Yes, they built roads, they brought running water, but at the same time, they blended millions of people into their culture so deeply that entire generations forgot who they truly were. When Roman generals marched into foreign lands, they didn't just arrive with swords. They arrived carrying a dream, the dream of becoming Roman. And behind that dream, a web of control, intricate and unescapable. Empires are always their own biggest believers. Every war is disguised as a war for peace. Every massacre becomes a necessary sacrifice. Every chain of slavery is justified in the name of culture. Look at the Mughal Empire. It gave the world breathtaking art, architecture, and culture. But behind the glittering palaces and grand monuments lay a ruthless system of administration and violence. Countless souls were crushed in that glow of royalty. Those who couldn't pay taxes, those who stood apart because of their faith, those who were simply different. The British Empire took things even further. They didn't just rule with guns. They conquered through trade and law. In countries like India, they turned the educated class into instruments of their own slavery. They printed books, opened schools, and slowly planted the idea that bondage was actually progress. These empires didn't just redraw borders on a map. They rewired the way people thought. A tribal man who once worshipped his forest as a living god was suddenly told the real god lived in a church. Every empire makes a promise: prosperity, safety, progress. But that promise is always left unfinished, forcing people to live inside an illusion. Identities get erased, languages vanish, traditions are buried under history's dust. And when someone dares to ask, "Who are we?" the answer comes back cold: "You are whoever we say you are." History's harsh truth is this: the bigger the empire, the more delicate its lies. Lies you can't see with your eyes, lies you can't hear with your ears, but lies that sink deep into the roots of your mind. We think we're making our own choices, but in reality, the very direction of our thoughts was chosen for us. Even today, we live as heirs to that imperial mindset. The language we speak, who's it? The clothes we call civilized, who decided that? Who taught us who's a terrorist and who's a revolutionary? Who wrote that script? Even after an empire falls, its shadow lingers for centuries. In our culture, in our education, in our laws, even in our dreams. Empire is history's most successful deception. A lie so subtle, entire generations live inside it, never even realizing it's there. It convinces us that control is peace, that slavery is civilization, that erasing yourself is progress. So now ask yourself, are you truly free, or are you just another citizen of an invisible empire, believing its lies as truth? Chapter 7. Religion and Ideology. The oldest technique ever used to rule the human mind. Do you know what the greatest form of slavery is? Not the sword, not the gun. It's the ideas fed to us since childhood, beliefs planted so deep that a person begins to doubt their own ability to think. That is the real power of religion and ideology. An invisible web spread across the human mind. No handcuffs, no chains, and still, you're not free. When empires controlled bodies, religion took control of souls. Kings used swords to instill fear, but religion, it lit a fire inside the soul itself, with the fear of sin and the promise of virtue. Religion was never about the search for God. It was power's most brilliant invention. A system where asking questions became a sin, and blind belief was rebranded as faith. Every religion worked the same way, to divide humanity. This is you. That is them. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Jain, everywhere. Battles were fought in the name of identity. Sometimes against the walls of a temple, sometimes beneath the minarets of a mosque, sometimes inside the echoing halls of a church. But the real battle doesn't happen outside. It happens inside. When a child is born, they have no religion. They aren't Muslim. They aren't Christian. They aren't Hindu. But within a few years, seeds are planted in their mind, so deep that they grow up learning to hate someone who is just like them, only because they pray differently. This is the darkest shadow of all. When a human being believes they are righteous, and everyone else is a sinner. Look back at history. Every massacre, every war, every atrocity, behind it, there's always an ideology, religion, nationalism, caste, race, or some so-called holy mission. And the most dangerous part of these ideologies, they convince a person that whatever they're doing, because in their mind, it wasn't just their will, it was God's will. And that's where the madness begins. In the Crusades, tens of thousands were slaughtered simply because they followed the wrong religion. In Nazi Germany, millions of Jews were burned alive, not because of what they did, but because they weren't considered a pure race. And in India, one of the bloodiest chapters of history, the partition, was carved out on nothing but the walls of religion. Religion and ideology, when stripped of love and compassion, are no less poisonous than venom. They stop us from being human. We stop seeing each other as people, and instead we become a religious believer, a patriot, a revolutionary. But above all, we forget the one thing: we were meant to be first, human. Even today, we sit inside these invisible cages. We tell ourselves we chose our faith, our identity, our beliefs. But the truth is, you didn't choose them. Your ancestors did, and you were simply born into their script. Religion and ideology, two master keys that unlock the doors of human history. In the right hands, they can spread light, but in the wrong hands, they can drown an entire civilization in darkness. And after this chapter, you should ask yourself one question. What I believe, is it really mine? Or is it just a script someone else handed down to me? Because now, it's time to look back at the entire journey. The story of how we evolved from animals to humans. How language connected us, but also began to divide us. How farming enslaved us. How empires and trade sold us out. And how religion and ideology blinded us. This was Sapiens, a brief history of humankind. The raw, unmasked truth, a mirror so sharp, most people don't even dare to look into it. But you did. And now, if you followed this entire journey, it's your turn to give something back. If these stories shook you, if even one crack appeared in the walls of your old beliefs, if at any moment you saw yourself inside this story, then don't just scroll away. Hit like, share this video, and most importantly, subscribe, because with just one click, these powerful truths can reach more people, and together, we can begin to wake up a society that has been asleep for far too long. So now the choice is yours. Will you open your eyes or fall back into the dream?